Chapter 11. Yuhuan University was in the capital, more than 1,000 kilometers away from here in the north. To ask why Yuhuan grew up in the end have never been out of the F city, has always wanted to go a little farther to see, and the teacher happened to recommend the capital of the school. University life is no different from that of the average girl, studying, participating in clubs, primping herself, and falling in love. Yuhuan's first love started when she was a sophomore. The other party and Yuhuan and the same club department, reading literature major, is the senior, but also Yuhuan dormitory often by the roommates to talk about the object. At first, Yuhuan and its communication is not much, cannot appreciate the roommates for the reason of its obsession, although the other side has a good face. Debate is also very good, but listen to the roommates talk about more, she actually gradually recognized the other side of the excellent. So when the senior began to pursue her, the roommate was also bought a variety of assists. Yuhuan will be in the half-push half-assisted and its determination of the relationship between men and women. At the beginning of the relationship, Yuhuan did not much like each other, but women seem to be inevitable, will always be touched, and has been accompanied by their own dependence and love. By the time she graduated, Yuhuan had decided to stay in the capital. Her boyfriend is also a foreigner, and his parents have been asking him to go back, and have arranged a good job for him. Although the boyfriend decided to stay in the capital because of Yuhuan, he gave up after 2 years of persistence. Because of the pressure of life, because of cohabitation reveals more and more differences in concepts, because of each other's busy on the feelings of neglect, but also because of Yuhuan's salary gradually exceeded the boyfriend, the other side of the self-esteem began to settle imbalance. The boyfriend finally decided to go back to his hometown to accept his parents' arrangement. The breakup was a rational decision after serious communication between the two sides, but the aftermath of the breakup is huge. Even if Yuhuan didn't feel anything at the time, even if she rationally knew that the relationship was over, certain areas of her brain still wouldn't be involuntarily active, making her unconsciously want to contact the other person, recalling over and over again the things that she had done with the other person. Things are not what they used to be makes people suffer. Yuhuan continued to hold out in the capital for half a year, and finally in a serious illness, because of his father's sentence come back, and chose to return to the current city. Compared to the capital, this place has a better climate, is closer to home, and is also a cosmopolitan city, so there is no worry about job development, but there are also shortcomings. There are no alumni in the legal profession here, and there are no accumulated contacts, so it's almost the same as starting all over again. But the good thing is that Yuhuan enrolled in school early, and after graduating and working for 2 or 3 years, she has only just turned 24. She was still able to endure hardship and learn things quickly. She got a new job and got busy again, and a new romance followed soon after. Yuhuan's second boyfriend, to put it in a cliched way, was met on a blind date. Yuhuan at first only to deal with the elders, although the other side of the appearance of the income is not bad, but she could never mention her heartbeat feeling. Good and the other side did not show the urgency of the purpose of the other side, only to say that when a friend to understand each other, Yuhuan also agreed. The two exchanged WeChat, the other began to take the initiative to find her. He will not be like the general dating object like everyday good morning, good night, he will only pick a little life interesting things to share with her. During that time Yuhuan work is very busy, many times cannot reply to the message in time, the other side does not care, no matter when she back, his attitude is as good, and always be able to talk to her about the day to day properly pick up so a sentence or two, so that the topic will continue to be pleased. After a long time, she found it quite comfortable to chat with him, plus the two had a lot in common, and after a few more dates, they started to try to date. Yuhuan's second boyfriend is the kind of person who is very good at what he does. Early in the relationship, Yuhuan almost cannot pick fault, he always to her opinion first, a variety of details in place, thoughtful, will be busy in her to help her set the alarm clock to ensure that she will not miss the important moments, will be in her physiological period at any time in the car ready with brown sugar water, to go to where the first initiative to report the itinerary. But this is such a considerate boyfriend, Yuhwan one time but accidentally bumped into him and other women dating. She's another blind date introduced by her family. I haven't told you because I don't want to give you pressure. In fact, my family is very anxious for me to get married, but you said that you don't want to think about getting married in the last 2 years. My mom's health is getting worse and worse these days. I can't push it. That blind date, I've only had dinner with her twice. Really, I promise, there's nothing between us. The ex-boyfriend was caught in the bag, so explained. Those words were later proven to be more than 50% lies. But perhaps it was his usual good behavior that made her trust him too much. Perhaps it was at that time to men this kind of creature is not too. Disappointed, Yuhwan at that time heard the explanation of the first time, actually really began to seriously reflect, is not their own problem. In this relationship, is she too strong, did not give him appropriate positive feedback? Is she too independent, did not give each other enough security? He has implicitly mentioned the issue of marriage several times and she has been vague. Has she chilled his heart? Yuhwan excused the other person in her brain. She wanted to forgive him, but she was still more or less diabolical. During that time, she had just finished working on an important case, and had taken time off to plan an outing with him. Things happened, she did not have the mood to play, and lazy to cancel the leave, dry use of vacation time to go to the suburbs alone to soak in hot springs to relax. Hot Springs Resort is located in the mountain scenic area, the entire project built on the mountain. Late fall there will be a large red maple forest can be viewed, but Yuhwan went to the city just into the fall, coupled with the holiday is not, the resort is a clean time. When Cincy called to care about Yuhwan, Yuhwan was occupying the best view of the mountain resort's hot spring pool alone. She saw no one around, simply turned on the speakerphone, lying on her back while soaking in the bath, while with Cincy recounted the full story of the incident, including the ex-boyfriend's explanation. But right after the conversation, But right after he finished talking, he realized that not far from the pool, behind a corner covered by shrubs, there was another person. It was Gao Yan. Mr. Gao. Yuhwan hung up the phone and greeted awkwardly. Chapter 12. At that time, Yuhwan did not have much contact with Gao Yan. Although Yuhwan's law firm and Le Shang had always had a close working relationship, due to Gao Yan being a big client and an early client, Le Shang's cases, no matter how big or small, were all handled by Fred himself. Yuhwan and Gao Yan really can't be considered as familiar. Seeing him come out from behind the shrubs, he was so embarrassed that he couldn't wait to snap a hole in the ground to drill into it. I'm sorry, I didn't know that you were here just now. It's me who's sorry. Gao Yan sank his voice. For some reason, there was an indescribable somberness on his entire face. Just now I was a bit sleepy and dozed off. I didn't make a sound in time to let you know. Later, Yuhwan read the reports and realized that, just a few days before that, Gao Yan's mother passed away. But at the time, she only thought that he was upset because he had been disturbed, so she just said that she was almost done with her dip and excused herself. Just as she stepped out of the pool, Gao Yan suddenly called out to her, Yuhwan. Does Mr. Gao still have something to do? I'm sorry to hear about your personal matters, but Gao Yan frowned, as if hesitating, but still spoke. I suggest you better check your boyfriend's cell phone. Yuhwan had a hard time describing what he was feeling at that moment. Gao Yan said that it wasn't his intention to be silent, yet he clearly heard all of her and Cincy's conversations clearly. Although she felt that it wasn't her fault that Fujimori man was dating another woman behind her back, her boyfriend's duplicity was hard to keep from speculating whether it was her lack of vision and charm. And now that Takayanashi had reminded him that it could be worse. For a moment she felt like a clown. Shamed and embarrassed, she didn't respond and hurriedly wrapped the towel around her and left. Gao Yan, on the other hand, did not stop there. Know how to check your cell phone? He turned to look at her back road clearly out loud. Friends circle message list, cell phone navigation address bar, hotel, takeaway orders. Chapter 13 Doubt. Between male and female friends, should trust each other, should not make checking the cell phone this kind of invasion of people's privacy. But what about the cracks in the trust already? Gao Yan's words were buried in Yu Huan's heart like a seed. At first she disagreed, but after Gao Yan reminded her, she did find anomalies. For example, her ex-boyfriend's cell phone almost never rang when he was with her, and he didn't look at it. This habit had been with him since the two first started dating. At first, Yu Huan thought it was because he respected and cared about her, but now she thinks it's fishy. How can anyone not have to deal with work at all when they're on break? Once the seed of suspicion has germinated, it is difficult to contain it. Finally, Yu Huan still cannot hold back, in the ex-boyfriend asleep after checking his cell phone. WeChat chat page does not have any abnormality, Yu Huan according to Gao Yan said, into the circle of friends message list. In this list, there are messages from other people interacting with him, who liked him, who replied to him. Yu Huan found a few accounts from which something was wrong, clicked in, but the chat message field was all blank. In a flash of lightning, she thought of her own message box, but how could she not find it, whether it was from the contact list, or the history message record? Yu Huan was inexperienced, so she had to back out, and followed what Gao Yan said to check her cell phone's navigation again. In the history of her ex-boyfriend's navigation, she found that in addition to her address, there were 2 other addresses that were also obviously cell addresses, both in his history and in his favorites. But with only addresses, it's hard to rule out if this is a friend or family member. It wasn't until Yu Huan clicked on his Meituan and saw his group buying records and takeout orders over the past few months. I've actually had more than a few meals with her, to be exact. We've been in contact for 2 months. Under the evidence of Yu Huan, the ex-boyfriend changed his words. He explained anew, but Yu Huan was already wary, and she soon realized that the only things he added to his new confession were the ones she had found out about. She found 2 months' worth of orders. In his words, he had only been in contact with his blind date for 2 months. She found movie tickets, restaurant group buys, and takeout orders. He claimed that his relationship with the other person had only reached that point, and that there was no physical contact. Are those people he frequently likes and interacts with the ones he is flirting with or dating? Are those blank message boxes on his WeChat deleted chat logs? Is Yu Huan WeChat dialog box and is not hidden? Regarding the above, the other party all denied, only that he 2 days ago, WeChat uninstalled and reinstalled, and do not know what the reason. He swore all kinds of swearing, excuses to excuse, and said that Yu Huan, as long as the promise to marry, he immediately called in front of Yu Huan's face, and that side completely and utterly cut off clean. Yu Huan, this only at once grabbed the biggest loophole. So you still have contact with her? Ex-boyfriend immediately covered his mouth for a while before stammering to explain. No, originally last time with you to confess. I talked to her, I said I have a girlfriend, we do not contact again. But the other party does not accept, always call over. Yu Huan looked at the man in front of him who was still constantly lying, and for a while did not want to pursue anything. Is he still dating other women at the same time? 1 or 2? In the end, who is first and who is second? Will she be the little 3? It didn't matter anymore. From the moment she saw the movie tickets and the takeout order, she was done with him. She gave him a chance to defend himself, but just wanted to clarify the whole thing, learn some lessons, and avoid repeating the same mistake next time. However, he obviously could not stop until the Yellow River, and was still sophomoric until the last moment. If he had some real feelings for her, how could he treat her like a fool? And in the end, he only wanted to cheat her. Yu Huan was really disgusted. As a lawyer, she had seen all sorts of people, but when it came to feelings, she had never liked to speculate about others with malice, especially those on her pillow. And the result of her naivety was that she was taught a hard lesson. Seeing the true face of the man, Yu Huan decisively broke up. Because too much diaphragm, this breakup Yu Huan did not feel sad at all, but habit makes it so, when idle, or vaguely empty, accompanied by self-doubt. Chapter 13. So she met this kind of goods and blindly dated the other party? Yu Huan's mind was annoyed and depressed, since he saw this and proposed to go to a bar. Yu Huan actually rarely go to the bar. This is a place to hunt for sex and buy drunkenness. Hunting for sex, Yuhuan afraid of not safe. As for buying drunkenness, even if a big drunkenness, wake up still cannot solve the problem. But when the heart is empty, in a lively environment, it is better than staying at home alone and thinking nonsense. On Friday night, Yuhuan went to a bar with Sensi. She cannot drink. But after a few bottles of beer, the alcohol in her body went up to her face, and her head was confused. She took a somewhat weak step, avoided the noisy crowd and went to the restroom to dry heave, and when she finished, just as she put her hand under the faucet to rinse off, she heard someone behind her open up, "If you can't hold your liquor, then drink less." She turned her head to the sound. Gao Yan was coming from the other direction of the corridor. "It's dangerous to get drunk in a place like this," he kindly reminded. Yuhuan wanted to say that she came with her friends, and just as she turned around, heavy shadows appeared in front of her eyes. She nearly stepped and slipped in an unsteady manner, and at the critical moment, a hand suddenly crossed over to support him. "Thanks," Yuhuan said, and added as she let go of his hand, "Thanks for last time as well. Is that you taught me to check my cell phone?" "Doesn't sound like it was a good outcome," Gao Yan summarized. Yuhuan nodded. I don't know if it was the alcohol that catalyzed the desire to let people confide in her, or if Gao Yan's gaze that was clearly waiting for what was to come gave her encouragement. She told all about the results of the check and the other party's sophistry. Gao Yan listened in silence, occasionally frowning slightly, but most of the time his expression was scanty, as if he wasn't surprised at all. "Why are you so clear about it?" Yuhuan looked sideways at his face under the shade of the light, and suddenly couldn't help but ask. "Isn't it true that all men don't have a few good things in them? It's just a difference of whether or not they've been discovered?" This question, Gao Yan did not answer. Yuhuan waited for a while, and when she realized her presumptuousness in hindsight and thought that the person in front of her did not intend to answer her, she suddenly heard him speak. "It's not that men don't have a few good things, it's that the circulation rate of good men is low." Yuhuan was puzzled. Men are all very realistic. Almost at an age they will find someone to get married and have children, whether they have met love or not. Gao Yan continued to explain. A reliable man found his other half long before marriageable age, or earlier, during his student days, and nothing unexpected, a love affair leads to marriage. And if you want to find a man in the marriage market who is similar to you in age and hasn't settled down at nearly 30 he said here and suddenly turned his head to look at him. "Of course, I'm not saying there are absolutely no reliable ones. But odds are, either the other person is left over from being picked on and you can't see him, or scum." She gritted her teeth. "But what about you?" she suddenly asked again. She hadn't really had much contact with him in the years they had known each other, but by his logic, whether it was that remaining small percentage of dependable people, or scum, she didn't think he was either. "What about you? Which one are you?" Yuhuan couldn't help but stick over to look at him. She hadn't scrutinized her drunken appearance, but she guessed it was a little bit erotic. Because, she saw his gaze gradually change, getting darker and darker, and finally pressed down and lowered his head to kiss her. Chapter 14 Getting a Room. Gao Yan body pressed down, and Yuhuan closer and closer. His hand touched her cheek, his fingertips rubbing gently, and finally kissed her lips. Yuhuan smelled the smell of alcohol that he also had on his body, as well as the crisp, clean smell of him like a winter cedar, or maybe it was just the smell of perfume. Yuhuan was only slightly drunk that day, and her memory was still clear. She remembers that he kissed her gently, yet with a little bit of a teasing nature, a little bit of showmanship, as if answering the question she had just asked, "Scum." Even after releasing her, he frivolously asked, "Going to the hotel?" Yuhuan looked up to meet his gaze and, ghostly, answered, "Yes." Although conscious, if one were to ask what she was thinking when she nodded her head that day, it would be difficult for Yuhuan to explain. Before Gao Yan's kiss came up, her impression of him had been stuck in her high school days as a teenager holding an umbrella in the rain, cold and detached. After being reunited for work, the impression she had of him hadn't changed much either, still high and cold and hard to approach. She didn't know why he was playing such a joke on her, or maybe it wasn't a joke, and the man in front of her was the real him, stripped of his disguise, the real him. She wasn't sure, yet she couldn't stop being curious. If all men were no good, it didn't matter. She had a need anyway, even if it was a one-night stand, with an object like Gao Yan, no loss. Even because of the good feelings from high school, subconsciously, she had been willing to have something with him. Yu Huan couldn't tell, anyway, the two of them just got into bed that way. In the hotel room, Gao Yan went in first to take a shower, and ordered a cup of sugar water for Yu Huan, saying that it was to let her sober up, but in fact, Yu Huan knew that it was to give her a chance to back out. Yu Huan did not go. When Gao Yan came out of the bathroom half-naked wrapped in a bath towel, he gave her a slightly startled look. "Do you want to wash up?" "Uh-huh." Yu Huan answered and got up to go to the bathroom. In the bathroom, the hot and humid air mist had yet to dissipate. As the running water slid over her body, Yu Huan's brain uncontrollably imagined the man standing here just now. His stretched body, lean and slender, was much more robust than in high school. That day in the hot springs, it was too embarrassing for her to take a closer look. Now it seems that he should have insisted on working out. The evenly distributed upper body muscles, the hard chest with full lines, and the V-shaped, mermaid line that was hidden into the bath towel. It turns out that women, like men, are color-eating animals. When Yu Huan came out of the bathroom, Gao Yan had already gotten into bed first. He leaned back against the bed, flipping his cell phone with one hand, gently propping up his temples with the other, not knowing what message he was reading. The sliding door of the bathroom opened with a soft sound. He looked up at the sound, and there was a flash of amazement in his eyes. Chapter 14. Having had 2 boyfriends, Yu Huan was not surprised by this. It wasn't that she was pretty. It was just that on weekdays, she didn't want to be questioned about her professionalism because of her age, and would always try to dress up as professional and sophisticated as possible, and the whole person couldn't avoid looking old. After removing her clothes and makeup, she naturally looked younger, and at the same time, her figure was more substantial than it appeared. Gao Yan slightly leaned forward, putting the cell phone that hadn't yet turned off its screen to the side, and just looked at Yu Huan sideways. Yu Huan was stared at by that kind of sight, vaguely excited and at the same time feeling oppressed. She was inexperienced and didn't know what to do on this kind of occasion. Should she take off her clothes directly? Or should she talk about something first to ease the atmosphere? Was he experienced? Why didn't he say anything either, just looking at her? Like in the TV series, the kind of flirtatious compliments to each other, then embracing and rolling into bed. I'm afraid that when it comes to the implementation of it, it will be so awkward that people will want to pick their feet. Yu Huan moved her feet, meeting Gao Yan's gaze and walking towards him step by step, until she reached the edge of the bed. She hadn't thought of an opening, and the other party hadn't opened their mouths. She simply turned off the light and stripped off her clothes. She simply turned off the light, took off her bathrobe to dry herself, and dove in through the other end of the quilt. Yu Huan got under the covers. She lay down close to Gao Yan, her fingers unintentionally brushing against the firm arm muscles. He finally spoke out in the darkness. "Why are your hands so cold?" "Always like this." Yu Huan, maybe not enough qi and blood. As soon as the words fell, a slight sound of fabric rubbing was heard. It was his hand poking through the quilt. He finds her hand, pulls it up and holds it in his hand, feeling her body heat through his thin bones and flesh. His palm sizzled. In the darkness, where vision was denied and even the air was quiet, even such a slight experience was slightly exciting. She clearly felt his palm slide to the side of her waist. She couldn't control the soft gasp that leaked out, and the next second, he wrapped an arm around her waist and pulled her body toward him. "Are you cold?" She wasn't cold, but nervous and aroused. She turned on her side toward him, and his hand followed it up to caress her slim back. He moved back and forth across her back as he slowly rubbed up and down. Her heart was pounding in his hot palm, and that night she was sensitive as if for the first time. All the wine she had drunk had turned into hot flashes of steamy air, which vaporized into a thin sweat on her skin. Everything was too unreal and too real. In fact, Yuhuan was a cautious and somewhat conservative person, well-behaved and obedient since she was a child. This kind of thing, just like skipping classes and fighting when she was studying, was something she had never imagined. But undeniably, that night, in addition to physical pleasure, she also experienced a certain kind of hidden excitement that she had never experienced before, breaking morals and principles. At first she felt a little ashamed, but after a few times she gave up this inexplicable pride and forgot herself in great pleasure. Chapter 15: The Invitation. Yuhuan woke up driven by a fixed biological clock, and Gao Yan was still asleep. He was lying on the right side of the bed, half of his body covered with clean bedding, and seemed to be deeply asleep. His face was also slightly frowning in his sleep, the lines of his face as sharp and angular as a knife carving. The thought that yesterday he might have used such an expression to claim over her. Yuhuan's face couldn't help but heat up slightly. Carefully tugging the pressed strands of hair out from under his hand-arm, she stepped on the carpet with her bare feet towards the bathroom and put yesterday's clothes back on. The soreness in her legs made the heels a little hard to step on, and she still tried to be careful not to make a sound. When she finally made it out the door and into the elevator, she relaxed, leaning her back against the elevator wall and letting out a soft breath. Actually, she also had curiosity. If she didn't leave, when Gao Yan woke up, what would be the other's reaction? But the two weren't complete strangers, they still had to work together and cross paths. It wouldn't be good to be too awkward. Yuhuan just left. Meeting with Gao Yan again was 2 days later, in the elevator room of Zhongyou law firm. Dao Banquet was with Fred, and Yuhuan only saw the elevators the moment they opened, and could only greet the two in a calm manner. "Good morning, Mr. Gao." "Good morning, Fred." "Morning." Fred responded succinctly, while Gao Yan only nodded slightly. He waited for Yuhuan to enter the elevator before he glanced at her through the reflective door, but it was only a glance, and he turned his head sideways to continue discussing the case with Fred. Neither of them mentioned that chaotic night again. Gao Yan was still the same cold and aloof Gao Yan, and Yuhuan was still the same dedicated Yuhuan. Even if the two stand together, the people of the law firm will not be associated with the two. More will not guess that the two have been together. Because of this, a month later, when Fred was too busy and decided to hand over the day-to-day affairs of Lusheng to his subordinates, he was the first to think of Yuhuan. At that time, Yuhuan had been with Zhongyou for 3 years. She had enough experience and was more free than the rest of the firm. Lusheng's daily affairs are mainly some important contracts and process review. Yuhuan needs to take half a day to 1 day a week to go to Lusheng office and Gao Yan's meeting, but also inevitably more up. But even so, in addition to official business, the two usually just a simple greeting, and no unnecessary words. Yuhuan went to Lusheng's office as usual. One day, she was washing cups when Tangan from the sales department came to her, saying that the sales department had 2 concert tickets left over from a previous event and asked if she was interested. Tangan said that no one in their department was available on weekends, and he happened to see her listening to that band's songs last time, so he came over to ask her for but no more, no less exactly 2 tickets, clearly revealing his bad intentions. Yuhuan understood, of course, and still nodded her head in agreement. Tangan invited her and immediately left happily. Yuhuan watched him go out and just took a sip of his coffee, when she looked up and saw Gao Yan, who was passing by not far away. The pantry of Lusheng's legal department is semi-open, and although it's facing an internal corridor where not many people usually pass by, the lack of a partition door makes it soundproof to say the least. He should have heard it, Yuhuan thought. Chapter 15. But Lusheng didn't have a regulation against office romances, and besides, she wasn't exactly an employee of Lusheng, to be precise. "Mr. Gao." Yuhuan greeted, carrying her coffee and borrowing her way past Gao Yan. Gao Yan, however, called out to her, "Preparing to go to a concert on the weekend?" "Ah, he really heard." Yuhuan had to nod her head. Dao Yan looked at her sideways. You only come here half a day a week. You probably don't know how many ex-girlfriends Tang Yan has in the sales department. These words were sort of a naked reminder how much of a womanizer Tang Yan really was. But about this, Yu Huan had more or less heard about it. She wasn't surprised. Dao Yan was slightly surprised. You don't seem to mind? Yu Huan nodded. At that time, 3 months had passed since she broke up with her ex. During these 3 months, she had met quite a few people, blind dates, netizens on dating apps who chatted quite well, and people she met because of her work who showed a favorable impression of her. It wasn't that she was in a hurry to fall in love or get married. It's just that, as Gao Yan said, if a man is in good condition and doesn't plan to settle down by the time he reaches his 30s, then 80% of them aren't very reliable. And during that time, she happened to be relatively free, so she wanted to see more. Those men in the end, how unreliable method. The first meeting does not move to show off the rich, the second date but began to cry poor, just met once or twice to ask you to go on a trip, all kinds of painting big cake. In these dates, Yu Huan brought a scrutinizing gaze, and as expected, she saw all sorts of sets. It was like doing observational experiments. She gradually took this as a pastime after her boring work. If the other party was to her liking in all aspects, she didn't even mind accompanying the other party in acting. After all, her life seemed like a body of still water, always needing some stimulation to stir up a little wave. Don't mind. Yu Huan then blithely said, but it's just killing time. His ex-girlfriends don't need me to worry about them. Passing time? Dao Yan sniffed and raised his eyebrows somewhat subtly. When she staggered away and prepared to leave, he suddenly called out to her again. Tang Yan's ticket was left over from the sales department's event, right? Eh? Yu Huan, yes. The tickets from the sales department's event are all from Sunday. Dao Yan said while turning towards Yu Huan, until the distance between the two of them is only half a foot. He then stopped, slightly sidestepped, and lowered his head to Yu Huan's ear. I have 2 tickets here for Saturday, the 3rd row seats, if you just want to pass the time, or it's more suitable for you. For concert tickets, Yu Huan had always bought the first day if he could as well. The first day singers would be in better shape than the second day. After all, the first day was well rested before the first day, while the second day would more or less be affected by the first day's performance. And the so-called 3rd row of the high feast is usually the best position in the concert. Sometimes money is not always able to grab. Yu Huan turned his head sideways, looking at Gao Yan, who didn't look like he was joking, and after a long moment of silence, he spoke in a slightly regretful tone. It seems that I can only refuse Supervisor Tang. Gao Yan's intentions were certainly more than simply listening to a concert. On that day, as soon as the concert was over, the two of them unspokenly went to the hotel next door and opened a room. For their second date, Yu Huan was prepared and brought her own toiletries, but just after taking off her clothes, Gao Yan knocked on the door and came in. This time, he skipped the kissing step and pressed up to hold her against the wall. That night, the battle was even more intense than the first night between the two. Exhaustion. The next day, Yu Huan uncharacteristically woke up in the middle of the day. The pillow was empty early, but the curtains were tightly drawn. She touched her cell phone. The time showed 11 o'clock, and an unread message came from Gao Yan. Hotel, I renewed the day, you can rest a little more. Gao Yan's WeChat was added only after Yu Huan took over Fred's job. The two had only chatted a few sentences in their previous records, all about work, and this was the first private conversation. Yu Huan informed a sentence after checking out. Gao Yan did not with a timely reply, but sent another invitation the next day. Yu Huan agreed. After a while, the two became fuck buddies. Gao Yan looked at Xin Yilan in front of him. Inevitably, because of his appearance, because he and Gao Banquet have a few % similar face, she will always think of Gao Banquet more, and on WeChat, Gao Banquet's message is still stuck in the room number information sent last time. They hadn't contacted each other for 3 days. After the last time, he mentioned that he was going on a business trip, and usually when he was on a business trip, they didn't contact each other often. Yuhuan also learned about the frequency of chatting between gunners only after she became gunners with Gao Yan. When they were in the same city and in a dating situation, they would contact each other every day, seemingly daily greetings, but in fact indicating their status, and if they both wanted to, they would make a date unannounced. As for when one of you is traveling, occasionally also chat, probably is 2 or 3 days once of frequency, so as not to be too abrupt when the next date. Gao Yan has always taken more initiative in their contact. Yuhuan mostly replies passively and doesn't really take the initiative to start a conversation. Because taking the initiative generally implies a desire to make a date when he's not traveling, he'll take the initiative, more often than she needs. When he was traveling, it was useless for her to take the initiative. Sometimes Yuhuan wondered if she was just looking for a fuck buddy, shouldn't it be easier to just pass it along? But sex this kind of thing, sometimes with skincare products, with the habit of high-end, similar efficacy even if there is a flat replacement, skin feeling is also persuaded to retreat. And the bed or, skincare or, Yuhuan did not have the habit of mixing. Chapter 16 Spoiled. Gao Yan this trip difference, a swing half a month are not seen back. Yuhuan busy working, try not to think about the physical emptiness, but in this busy, Xin Yilan fell ill. Counselor Yu, I have a cold, can I take a day off today? On Wednesday morning, Yuhuan received a message from Xin Yilan before he even arrived at the law firm. The case of Roan Industries is going to trial in a couple of days, although Yuhuan is not the main lawyer, she is also busy organizing the information. She has been working overtime until 9 or 10 o'clock in the past few days. Xin Yilan insisted on accompanying her to work overtime. Chapter 16. I wonder if the air conditioning in the office got too low. Thinking of the last time Xin Yilan said he lived alone, Yuhuan couldn't help but make a call. The phone rang for a while before connecting, and Xin Yilan's breathless voice came from the other end. Lawyer Yu. How are you doing? Sounds pretty serious, went to the hospital? Yuhuan asked. Xin Yilan lay drowsily on the bed, reacting to Yuhuan's words for a while before returning, no. But I took medicine. He focused his gaze on the over-the-counter cold medicine unwrapped by the bedside, his hand slowly reaching over and grabbing the cup on the side. The medicine he'd taken in the morning had made him sweat, and even his mixed strength seemed to have evaporated with it. Off this one simple action, he was so tired that he gasped for breath, and his head was even more dizzy. He arched his body and couldn't help but cough again. Yuhuan heard the sound and couldn't help but frown. Where do you live? Yuhuan carried the medicine to the address given by Xin Yilan. After entering the password, the door to the room opened and inside was an empty hall. Yuhuan saw the hidden bedroom door at a glance. She went up and knocked on the door and then pushed it open, only to see that inside the curtains were tightly closed, and in the darkened room, Xin Yilan was lying on the bed, stretching his hand outside the quilt, and the whole person was curled up into a ball. Yilan. Yuhuan walked towards him and squatted in front of the bed. In the dimness, he could only be seen frowning, as if he had experienced a not-so-pleasant dream. Yilan, wake up, let me take your temperature. Yuhuan called again, taking out the thermometer she bought early in the morning. The person on the bed, however, woke up from the cold touch, raising his head in a daze, recognizing the other party's exposed face. Lawyer Yu. His voice was a little more muffled than when he answered the phone earlier, and his breath was unusually hot. Brushing against Yuhuan's palm was hot. Yuhuan, you really took the medicine? Eat. Xin Yilan turned sideways and pointed to the bed. As soon as he moved, his head started a burst of dizziness again, so he had to lie down and close his eyes again. Yuhuan took the box, which was just ordinary cold medicine. Only took this? Yuhuan raised her eyebrows. It's a good thing Xin Yilan's temperature wasn't too high when she measured it. She rummaged through her bag again, and after a long time, found a bag of punch. Let me help you brew another cup of punch. Chinese medicine? The other party, however, grabbed her hand and shook her head. I'm not used to Chinese medicine. But you have a throat. I want to drink silver ear and pear soup. Xin Yilan suddenly said. He looked at Yu Huan, opening his eyes as wide as a deer's wet eyes. He even shook her hand as if he was pampered. Yu Huan lowered her head and met those pitiful eyes, as if tears were going to come out in the next second. After a long time, she responded, "Okay, wait a moment." After Yu Huan helped Xin Yilan cover the quilt, she retreated from his room. It's still morning, and takeout orders are not taken until after 10:30, and most of the restaurants outside the neighborhood are still open. Yu Huan drove the car around the neighborhood, and then helplessly drove to the supermarket. At the same time Yu Huan was busy cooking silver ear soup. Gao Yan, who got off the plane, also received a text message from Xin Yilan. "Uncle, I have a cold, it's so serious." "Uncle, are you coming back today?" It was followed by a crying emoji. As Xin Yilan, who had been spoiled by Gao Nan in the same way he spoiled his daughter since childhood, Gao Yan sometimes felt that he was simply petulant like a princess. He slightly disgustedly clicked on the language call. No one answered on that side for a long time. "It's probably quite serious." Gao Yan hung up the call and handed his luggage to the driver. "Don't go back to Lishang first, drive me to Yilan's place." Half an hour later, Gao Yan arrived at Xin Yilan's apartment with his medicine and breakfast. He hadn't even entered the password when he vaguely heard sounds coming from the kitchen. Since Xin Yilan had moved apartments, he knew that he had added a lot of things, including kitchenware, but it was all just for show. Who was cooking? He opened the door suspiciously, then saw Yu Huan, who was busy in the kitchen. Chapter 17 Angry. Yu Huan bought fresh silver ear and saved the time for soaking. She simply washes the silver ear, removes the root, then bit by bit tears it into small pieces, packs it into a casserole dish, puts in the rock sugar and the equally cleaned lily slices. Add water, turn on the heat, and make the soup. While the soup was boiling, Yu Huan cleaned the snow pear. The open kitchen, connected to the living room, was facing the front door. She had just turned off the faucet when she heard the sound of the room door opening, and turning around, she saw Gao Yan. For eyes met, and both of them were a bit surprised that the other appeared here. "Back from your business trip?" Yu Huan asked first. "Well, just after getting off the airplane, I received a message from Yilan saying that he was sick." Gao Yan frowned slightly. "He sent it to you too?" "He called me in the morning to take time off. I heard that he seemed quite serious and remembered that he said he was living alone before and was not at ease, so I came over to take a look." Yu Huan explained. As soon as the words fell, the casserole gurgled and the water boiled. Yu Huan hurriedly turned down the fire and used a knife to start peeling the 2 snow pears that had been washed. While she was busy, Gao Yan went to the bedroom to see Xin Yilan. When he came out again, the snow pears had already been peeled and cored by Yu Huan, and were cut into small, evenly sized pieces on a plate. "What are you cooking?" Gao Yan asked. "Silver ear snow pear soup." Yu Huan placed the cutting board under water to rinse, cooked it for Yilan. He coughed badly and said he wanted to drink this. "You personally cooked it for him if he wanted to drink it?" Gao Yan. Cooking in someone else's house is a bit of an unauthorized act in the end, Yu Huan had to explain. "I couldn't buy it cooked outside. I originally bought him the punch, and he refused to drink it." She thought for a moment and then asked, "Does Yilan have any preconceived notions about Chinese medicine?" "What preconceptions?" "He simply hated the flavor. In the past, every time he had a cold, Gao Lan had always complied with him, and then his father took care of him, and he still obediently drank the Chinese medicine. His mom and grandmother spoiled him." Gao Yan succinctly summarized. Yu Huan didn't know how to take this. Just as the cell phone rang, Yu Huan picked it up while walking to the balcony. Chapter 17. The phone call was from Eric, about the Rona Industries case going to trial on Friday. Yu Huan answered the phone and turned back to look again. Gao Yan was surprisingly still standing in the inner kitchen, even as he uncovered the casserole. "Even though it's fresh fungus, it's not that fast." Yu Huan walks over. "Do you have something to do later?" "Nothing important for now." Gao Yan, what's wrong? "I have to go to Rona Industries later." Yuan took the lid in Gao Yan's hand and put it aside. He picked up the snow pear next to him and put it into the pot, waiting for the soup to reboil and turning down the heat. Another 20 minutes of simmering is almost enough. She turned to Gao Yan. Since you're here, I'll leave first. Before leaving, fearing that Gao Yan would make a mistake, Yuan specifically emphasized that she didn't need to care about anything, just wait 20 minutes and turn off the fire. However, when Xin Yilan came back from his illness, the first thing he said when he saw her was to accuse her of not keeping her word. "Lawyer Yu, where's the promised silver ear soup?" "Xin Yilan, you clearly said that you would cook silver ear soup for me, but in the end, I ended up drinking Chinese medicine, and now my mouth still has the taste of Chinese medicine." Yu said words don't count words. He was obviously in much better spirits, and his accusation against her was in the middle of his voice. "My words don't count?" Yuan felt wronged. "I can't buy ready-made silver ear soup. I specifically went to the supermarket to buy fresh silver ear for you to stew. Although the soup is not stewed, I have to leave beforehand, but your uncle-in-law." Yuan told Xin Yilan about leaving Gao banquet to watch the fire that day. "Ah? Then how come I didn't get a bite of soup?" Xin Yilan confused. Is he deliberately trying to make me drink Chinese medicine? He so can be like this. Xin Yilan was furious and immediately took out his cell phone and dialed Gao Yan. Yuan pretended to look at her computer, but her eyes unconsciously paid attention to the movements on Xin Yilan's side. She saw him walk out aggressively, and in the middle of the day, he came back grayly, stopping in front of her desk. "It's my fault, Counselor Yu. I forgot to tell you last time, I'm allergic to lilies, so I can't drink the one you cooked." "Ah? Rather, it's her who drew the snake?" Yuan raised her head, and then resumed lowering her head. "Oh, it's fine. Blame me for not saying it earlier." Xin Yilan was still blaming himself. He hadn't mentioned that soup, and Yuan didn't ask. But based on Xin Yilan's guilty expression, it seemed that the soup had most likely been poured out. After all, Gao Yan didn't like to eat sweets. Yuan had some subtle displeasure in her heart, but she didn't dwell too much on it, and the next day when she met Gao Yan in the elevator at Lushang, he took the initiative to mention it. "The silver ear soup you stewed last time, I realized after you left that it had lilies in it, and Yilan is allergic to lilies, so I didn't give it to him to drink." Gao Yan. "Oh." Yuan answered and didn't say anything else. The elevator was just the two of them. Even though the two had always focused on keeping their distance in public, Gao Yan still felt that Yuan was too silent. He couldn't help but look at Yuan through the reflective door. Noticing his line of sight, Yuan raised her head and met his eyes on the reflective mirror. "Then you could have at least told me?" "If you tell me, I can pack my own bags and take them away." Weekdays were busy with work, and Yuan didn't cook much. When she thought about what she had worked so hard to make that day, the final destination was the trash can. It was fine if Gao Yan didn't mention it, but when he did, she suddenly noticed that she wasn't actually that generous. "Or you could ask Yilan to pack it up and bring it to me, it's better than wasting it," she said. Her tone unconsciously carried some blame, and the face reflected in the mirror, its color sank 2 points along with it, seemingly quite dissatisfied with the way he handled the situation. "You." Gao Yan did not stagger in speech. "You think I poured the soup? Or else?" Yuan asked rhetorically. The elevator happened to open, reflective door. Yuan can not see Gao banquet look, only to hear the tone of voice blandly opened. "I drank." "Xin Yilan, uncle, didn't you say that you let the driver pack away the soup?" "I was too embarrassed to talk to Lawyer Yu." "Gao Yan, I said he packed it away, but I didn't say he drank it." "Xin Yilan. You're really nice." Chapter 18 Drinking Drunk. What's wrong with yourself? Back to Zhongyou, recalling what happened in the elevator, Yuan still felt embarrassed. It was just a pot of soup, what was she counting on? Last wedding too, this time too, why did some words come out without thinking? As Yuan thought irritably, the office door was suddenly pushed open, and Shin Yilin came in with a flourish. Lawyer Yu, you're back? Are you free tonight? Question mark. Yu Huan. The case of Rona Industries finally ended in court today, although the results are not out yet, but I just watched Lawyer Feng's performance. In court today, there shouldn't be any problem. Shin Yilin, tomorrow happens to be the weekend, why don't we go celebrate at night? In this case, Shin Yilin happened to be a professional counterpart and helped out a lot. This is the first case that he has completely followed since his internship. It's finally over. Yu Huan looks at him. How do you want to celebrate? How do I want to celebrate? Tell me. So Shin Yilin chose the bar. So this is what a domestic bar looks like. As soon as he stepped into the hustle and bustle of the hall with flashing lights, Shin Yilin couldn't help but lament. You haven't been here before? Yu Huan was surprised. I was just an adult when I went to New York. Shin Yilin shook his head. The bars over there aren't like this. Most of the bars in the United States are dancing and bouncing, or clearing the bar kind of place to simply drink and chat. The venue is not big. And the bar he was in now with Yu Huan was one of the top ones in the city. It was big and noisy. Inside, there were flashing lights and noisy crowds everywhere. Highly rhythmic dance music filled every corner, and performances were in full swing on the huge stage right in the center. It was Shin Yilin's first time here, and he couldn't help but be shocked by the spectacular atmosphere for a couple of seconds. When Yu Huan saw him look like he had never seen the world before, she pulled his arm. Let's go. Yu Huan led Shin Yilin to open a booth. Chapter 18. This space is so big. Shin Yilin once again let out the emotion of not having seen the world, and immediately went to touch his wallet to give a tip, only to realize that he had developed the habit of not bringing cash long after he came back. Did you bring change? He asked Yu Huan. No need to give. Yu Huan, they have a commission. Right-o. Shin Yilin then took his seat and generously ordered a Hennessy plus fruit plate plus soft drink set. The card seat was chosen at the side of the stage. The view was not wide but clever. Yu Huan's sideways head was just enough to see the handsome female DJ on the stage from next to the pillar. Yu Huan is not good at drinking and does not like to dance, and all he can do is watch the show quietly in the bar. Shin Yilin, on the other hand, chose to go dancing. At first, he wanted to pull Yu Huan together, but Yu Huan refused, so he had to go alone. He was sunny and handsome. He was so sunny and handsome that he attracted many girls who came forward to talk to him. Shin Yilin smiled and talked to them every time, but his gaze went to Yu Huan's side. Can't you just refuse? Having already had the experience of being a shield once, Yu Huan couldn't help but complain. No people girls have the courage to hit on, always have to give some face. Shin Yilin. Yu Huan is somewhat amused, teasing him. Want to go over to apply for the bar warming staff? Shin Yilin only laughed, and suddenly asked, Lawyer Yu, you really don't have a boyfriend? A similar question he asked on the first day. Yu Huan didn't understand how he was so nosy for a boy. Just curious. Shin Yilin sits next to Yu Huan, tapping her shoulder and whispering in a low voice, the guy on the right keeps looking at you. Also, the one in front of you, he's been paying attention to you for a long time, but you rejected him with a single look. After he finished his observations, he sat up straight again and resumed his normal volume. Colleagues at the law firm all say you're single, but I don't think it's like that. Why? Just because I don't like these men in the bar? Not so. How to say it? Is that you simply do not care about those for casting a glance at the people, here or not, the office of Roger, Rona Industrial Eric, they are. More or less to you have some meaning, but you outside of work as if you do not want to take care of them at all, have to put that slightest possible flirtation to death. So there's actually someone. Clandestine? No. Ambiguous stage? No. Being pursued? Could it be a crush? Drinking Shin Yilin is even more gossipy than usual. Yu Huan can't hold back a bit, and finally opened his mouth. It's a special person. Yu Huan did not want to define Gao Yan as a simple fuck buddy. On the one hand, she can't open her mouth to talk to Shin Yilin about such an inappropriate topic. On the other hand, she doesn't want to admit that Gao Banquet is just a fuck buddy. They don't just date. They didn't just date. Occasionally, they would fill each other's mental void and get along normally without being driven by lust. For example, they have a dinner date after a busy day at work. They play ball games and listen to concerts together on boring weekends. There was even a time when she temporarily found out that her aunt had come early, and he still came halfway across the city to her house, and ended up sharing a boring movie with her on the couch. Moments like that were few and far between, but they did exist. She sometimes vented with him about how bad things were at work, and while he had something bothering him, he was more inclined to vent it out sexually. But the essence was the same, both being trash cans for each other's emotions. Yu Huan doesn't often sort out the relationship between him and Gao Yan. But aside from enjoying each other's flesh, and the inevitable work interactions, she actually kind of liked him. Who would maintain a long-lasting fuck-buddy relationship with someone they didn't like? Maybe he kind of liked himself, too. Otherwise the awkward conversation in the elevator today wouldn't have happened. But words or behavior can be interpreted differently. People always tend to believe what they want to believe, and those who fall first are likely to lose. The previously suppressed irritation surged up again, and Yu Huan picked up his wine glass to touch Shin Yilin's glass, then muffled it in one gulp. Shin Yilin. He was prepared to listen to the story, but in the end, he only gossiped about such a brainless sentence. Special person? Who was it? He figured he couldn't wait for the rest of the story, but looking at Yu Huan's brash demeanor, he still picked up his cup and was good enough to follow with a drink. Chapter 19 Jealousy. Friday night, nearly 12 o'clock, and the bar is still noisy. One wave of people left, another wave of people came again. The dance floor. There will always be people tirelessly jumping, roaring. Yu Huan and Shin Yilin finished the last drink, and began to resist, propping up their heads with their hands, a little dizzy. Instead, there was a vibration on his cell phone, and the caller ID was none other than the culprit. How could he call him at this time? The two usually don't call on weekdays except for official business. Yu Huan looks at the screen and freezes for 2 seconds before picking it up. Gao Yan's familiar voice comes from the opposite side. Is Yilin with you? Yilin, ah. Yu Huan's tone suddenly lowered, reaching out to pat the person next to her. Your uncle is looking for you dash. She had just taken the phone away from her ear when the noisy voices of people and the bar's unique dynamic music penetrated through the speakers to the ears of the person on the other end of the phone. Gao Yan could not help but frown. Where are you guys? Half an hour later, Gao Yan arrived at the bar where Yu Huan and Shin Yilin were. Loud music, boisterous crowds, the clinking of glasses and out-of-control howls of laughter were everywhere. He struggled to get through the layers of people, but there were still people who were not interested in rubbing up against him. He managed to get across the dance floor and finally found Yu Huan and Shin Yilin in the booth next to the stage. Yu Huan's face was flushed, lying back against the sofa, slightly furrowing her brows, as if she was resting her eyes, and on the side, Shin Yilin collapsed beside her legs, his head resting on the back of her hand that was hanging down on the sofa, looking as if he was actually asleep. Wake up! Gao Yan walked over and patted Shin Yilin's face. Uncle? Shin Yilin opened her eyes in a daze. Why are you here? Your mom called you all night, and it all ended up finding its way to me, don't you think? Gao Yan. Chapter 19. Oh. Shin Yilin hurriedly went to touch his cell phone. Oops, where's my cell phone? The cell phone was clearly in his hand, and he was still rummaging around. Yu Huan opened her eyes to see that situation and couldn't help but laugh. Just how much did he drink? Gao Yan frowned. Yu Huan looked at the countertop that had been cleaned up long ago. It's not a lot, half of the package? You drank the other half? Gao Yan turned his head to look at her. Despite the fact that her senses were all degraded after being drunk, Yu Huan was able to hear that the tone of voice was a bit different than usual. Gao Yan helped Shin Yilin to walk outside the bar. His car was parked not far from the bar. a black Cadillac with smooth body lines and the V logo on the front of the car still shining brightly under the dim light. Although Shin Yilin was dizzy, he could still recognize his uncle's car, and reached out to open the door. "You sit in the front." "Gao Yan." "Oh." Shin Yilin had to reluctantly close the car door again. The driver, seeing that the person was drunk, hurriedly came out, carried Shin Yilin from Gao Yan, opened the passenger door. Yu Huan waited for Shin Yilin to get into the car, and only then did she return the bag that she had been helping to carry to him. But Shin Yilin was able to reach his head out of the car window. "Counselor Yu, you get in the car as well, we'll drop you off first. Is this drunk or not?" Yu Huan is still pondering. Gao Yan has already pulled open the car door for her first. "Get in." Yu Huan bends down to get into the back seat. "Lawyer Yu, where do you live?" Just as she got in, she heard the driver ask. She reported the neighborhood she lived in. "That's not far." The driver repeated the address on one side. "That's just right, first I'll drop you off, then I'll change to XX Road from the back of your neighborhood to send Xiaoshan home." He planned the route. Coldly, Gao Yan, who opened the door from the other side, interrupted him. "Uncle Zhou, we'll drop off Yilin first." Chapter 20, Being Competitive. Yu Huan sat on Gao Yan's lap, her skin hot as fire. She shifted slightly, trying to find a better angle, lifting her hips slightly, and her body shuddered as if she were electrified, but just then a large hand dropped down and tightened its grip, restraining her from further movement. "Wait a little longer." Gao Yan leaned his chin on her shoulder, pressing her with one hand and sliding the cell phone with the other, hoarsely whispering in her ear. "Wait a little longer? Wait a little longer?" Yu Huan didn't know how things had come to this. After they sent Shin Yilin home, Gao Yan heartily went upstairs with her. Everything was the same as the previous process, but right after he went further, he suddenly said, "I have to send a message back to Yilin's mother." He just hugged her and tapped his cell phone behind her back. He restricted her movements. The two had been going on like this for quite a while. She was teetering on the edge of madness. "How much longer are you going to take?" The other man didn't answer, just pinched her with his hands one at a time. In addition to the instinctive desire, there were also thoughts that had been piling up for more than half a month. She wanted him. Really wanted to. But she bit her lips tightly, unwilling to divulge half of it. As if as long as she didn't open her mouth, then everything could be reduced to the most fundamental desire. Yu Huan twisted her waist, unable to break Gao Yan's grip. It was difficult and torturous like never before. It was as if every inch of skin, every nerve was being tickled by feathers, on the verge of collapse. She scratched and clawed at his back. She heard the panting clearly intensify, but she still pressed hard against his waist to keep her from moving. Her lips on his shoulder opened and she couldn't help but bite down at his bulging obliques. She really hated him like this. Hated how subdued he was now, hated how sensible he was. She was suffering so much, and he could get away with it all. It was like he was stirring her heart without moving. Though that was what attracted her to him in the first place. But now, all she felt was annoyance. She increased the force on her mouth. Once upon a time, when they'd gone to bed, she'd been careful not to touch the skin on your piece of his neck because it was too conspicuous, for fear of leaving a mark. But today she was going all out trying to leave him tooth marks one by one. Deeper, and deeper. Preferably a mark he'd see the next, and the next. She sank her teeth into the skin of her shoulder, gradually increasing her strength. Hiss dash. Goyen went from a pressed breath at first, to a backward huffing breath at the back of his hand. He finally pulled away from her. "You." He frowned in pain, but when he looked into Yu Huan's eyes, he instantly forgot what to say. Yu Huan's eyes were vaguely aggrieved. Obviously the person who was bitten and bleeding is him, how come she also first aggrieved on? Yu Huan herself also realized that something was wrong, and panicked and looked away. Gao Yan looked at her fluttering eyelashes. "What's wrong? Angry?" Although he had gone a bit overboard just now, she could have opened her mouth. That was also something he wanted to do, as long as she opened her mouth and begged him for a word. Yuhuan moved her eyes away, avoiding meeting his gaze. There were some emotions that could perhaps be bared between lovers. Between fuck buddies, however, they could not. There was no way she could reveal them to him, and she hated the teasing he had just done, because she really wanted him. They could do the most intimate things, but they couldn't simply open their mouths and say they missed you. She thought back to their connection, and how it seemed like he was initiating more, but put another way, how it wasn't like she was responding to his needs every time. Like this time, it had been so many days since he had returned from his trip, and he was just now approaching her. She didn't know why she was suddenly counting on this. It was clear that at first she just wanted something to happen with him, but later she couldn't help but be greedy for more. Perhaps it was the alcohol that amplified the emotions that were usually deliberately suppressed. But there was no way she was going to reveal this complex and conflicted feeling of hers to him, so she just looked away and excused herself, not doing it. Fine, if you don't feel well, don't do it. Goyen. He could feel her retention, and he was equally uncomfortable himself. Yuhuan enjoyed his thoughtfulness while at the same time began to feel sorry for his hard feelings. Chapter 20. He was always like this, considerate, gentle, yet careful to keep to the boundaries of being a gunnery partner. He was too cunning, and he himself would always be the one to be taken. Yuhuan looked at Gao Yan and suddenly hooked his neck and kissed him. Other than that time at the bar, this was the second time they kissed. Yuhuan liked that feeling of Gao Yan's lips and tongue between her lips and teeth. But this moment, egged on by alcohol, and tortured by conflicting emotions, she followed her heart and pounced on him, forgetting to kiss him. Just kiss him. To kiss him. If he dared to push her away, if he tried to make any excuses, she'd tell him to get out. Get out of her world completely from now on. For the first time, Yuhuan pressed Gao Yan onto the sofa, thinking hatefully. However, the expected pushback and rejection did not come. Gao Yan only froze for 2 seconds before he reached back and hugged her. Gao Yan's arms slowly tightened with a gentle intensity, as if with some kind of soothing meaning, gently stroking Yuhuan's hair and the back of her neck. That kind of intimacy made Yuhuan's scalp go numb in an instant. She felt Gao Yan start to kiss back.